Hi, this is The Philosophical Angle, and I'm your host, Chris Angle. I am the author of 4 books on philosophy, one of which is The Nature of Aesthetics. They are available free for viewing online and as a download at www.philosophypublishing.com. Along with me is my panelist and discussant, Rick Samuelson. Rick graduated from Yale, has an MBA from Wharton, an MA from Tufts. He's retired from the investment banking industry and is currently an independent venture capitalist. Good to see you, Rick.
Good to see you.
The purpose of the Philosophical Angle is to examine the nature of the concepts being used in current media and compare the essence of the concept with the circumstances and usage in which the term is being used. This week, the topic is lies in politics. Why do politicians lie? And they do it fairly often. Throughout history, Nixon said, "I am not a crook." Clinton, "I did not have sex with that woman." Bush 41, "Read my lips, no new taxes." And there are many throughout history. Of course, the current administration is well within our current memory, so we have quite a few of those, which we can bring to as an example today. So let's go over a few of these. Of course, the most famous of all of them is, "You can keep your doctor and you can keep your plan. Period." And that's a quote. He often said period to demonstrate that emphatically that this is my position and it's not movable. It's true. Because he goes, "You can keep your doctor if you want him, period." As if it were a fact made in stone, chiseled in stone. So let's go over some of the others. "I will have the most transparent administration in history." TARP is to fund shovel-ready jobs. "The IRS is not targeting anyone." Oh, and this is one of my favorites, referring to Benghazi. "It was a spontaneous riot about a movie." "The public will have 5 days to look at every bill that lands on my desk." "It's not my red line, it's the world's red line," referring to Syria. Referring again to ObamaCare, "Premiums will be lowered by $2,500. I don't think so. Again, referring to ObamaCare and the website, "It's just like shopping at Amazon." Well, quite numerous. So, why do politicians say these things? Why do they lie? Well, let's talk about it a little bit and explore the reasons. Okay. Of course, it's within communication that they either tell a truth or a falsehood. It's not quite a lie, but so when you communicate, you can either tell a truth or a falsehood, and within that truth, you have an interest to inform. So that's the reason why you communicate with somebody else. You want to demonstrate knowledge of a possibility, a potentiality, of a fact, of a result. And you feel that this communication is good. It's good for you, and you're communicating it, this goodness. And And when you decide that you're going to communicate, that's a priority. You've established that this is a need to come out of you and be shared with somebody else. And that priority is a piece of knowledge. And you seek the approval of the other person with whom you are communicating. Because there's some sort of cooperation going on here. You're communicating in the hopes or with the potential to cooperate, which is going to produce something good. And that's the ultimate reason to communicate. You want to produce either good for the person with whom you're communicating or with yourself. It's important to you. And that importance is a type of good. Now, on the other hand, you can communicate and there might be a falsehood involved. In other words, you might be mistaken about a fact. It just doesn't work out as you thought. It could happen to anybody. In that case, it's a falsehood. But if you add intent, an intent to deceive, then the falsehood becomes a lie. So on some of these statements, let's take a couple. I will close Gitmo. I didn't mention that before. That might be a falsehood and not a lie because he probably intended to close Gitmo. But in the becoming president, he probably had other things to consider that he deemed were good, and thus he changed his mind, and thus at the time that would have been a falsehood, and then he changed his mind because of incoming facts. However, amongst within the most famous one, you can keep your doctor, period. Hard to say, because he said period, knowing this is how it's going to be, and I don't think it's a change of mind. I think it just turns out to be not the case, which means that that's probably an intent to deceive. Because why did he do that? To avoid knowledge of the result. And why would he want that to happen? Why would he want the result not to be known to all? Because there's a fear of disapproval, of an ideological objective. The ideology is not possibly good in this case because it's going to bring in government inefficiency and socialism. So he makes a decision to avoid the truth. And that is a non-ethical action. And so he decides that the end, his priority to bring a socialistic system to the United States that will really take over 18% of the economy, invokes an ethic of the end justifies the means, which is a non-cooperative type of ethic. Really, it's not ethics at all. It's non-ethical. Because ethics require respect. And we use respect so that we can cooperate. And we cooperate in order to produce. And we produce things that for goodness of ourselves and for others. So, and in this case, he's cooperating, or should cooperate, with the Constitution and the people of the United States. So, when you use the ends that justifies the means, you're avoiding the cooperative priority set to you as the President of the United States, who is to defend and uphold the Constitution. So let's go at this point and bring in Rick and see what he has to think about ideology, the president, and lies and politicians throughout history. Rick, any comments on what we've done so far?
Well, the only point I would add in regard to Mr. Obama is that I think at some stage hubris takes over. I mean, he's someone who has been championed by the press and others from the very start of his presidency. I mean, upon taking office, virtually, he was awarded a Nobel Prize for what seemed to be no achievement whatsoever, just the fact that he won the presidency. And he's had a pretty friendly relationship with the press, with the dominant public media, such that he's received almost no criticism, or very limited criticism in, amongst members of Fox News and elsewhere for the various events you described, whether it's Benghazi or the IRS targeting or what have you. The lack of influence that has had on his public approval ratings, I think has surprised everyone until recently. It's only been since the recent evolution of the news concerning the Affordable Care Act and the many lies he's told surrounding that, and his administration have told, and the utter incompetence that we've seen on display, that his public approval's really suffered. And so I think over the course of what's been a number of years now, a certain hubris has developed within this administration to the point where they actually believe that nothing could slow down their agenda except the Republican members of Congress, and that they could pretty much say almost anything they wanted. That seems to be, until quite recently, the stand of not only Obama, but various members of his administration, and including Jay Carney, who is his spokesman much of the time.
Okay, do you think the press is now starting to wake up and catch him on some of these falsehoods that actually may be actual lies?
I think if they're reporting on it. Newspapers like the New York Times are reporting on it. Even The Economist is reporting on it. What you're not seeing are editorials within the liberal press even suggesting that ObamaCare be rolled back. The general tone of the editorials is, well, there have been misrepresentations, but the notion of the Affordable Care Act, the inspiration behind it, is so important to the United States that we have to overlook these, unpleasantries.
What do you think the result of these lies will be? In other words, obviously the one that's circulating within the media that gets the biggest play is you can keep your doctor if you like him, and you can keep your plan if you liked it. Period. That's getting the majority of play of the falsehoods. Is that going to come back and bite the Democrats in the next election? Well, we've got a midterm election coming up a year from now, a little over later on in 2014. Could this?
Well, at this stage, it doesn't seem as if many Democratic senators or congressmen are publicly at odds with the White House. I mean, some are moving legislatively to kind of protect on the downside by proposing measures that would delay the implementation of parts of the Affordable Care Act. I mean, there is some dissonance at the edges, shall we say, but I don't see any Democrats yet renouncing Obamacare or that it should be overturned. I mean, when you see that, I mean, you're going to see a real rift within the party. I have seen also some Democratic strategists saying, well, look, yes, he lied, it's bad, and the effect of that's going to be felt at the polls in November, and we're going to have to live with it, and let the chips fly. I have heard that kind of sentiment voiced, an admission that there's kind of a systematic misrepresentation of Obamacare that's been going on for years now, and the cat's out of the bag, and we have to live with it and suffer the consequences. Some Democrats seem to think that it's going to help them in the polls.
Oh, wow.
More realistic ones, I think, are prepared for the possibility that the Democrats may lose control of the Senate.
And what about later on in 2014, when the corporate group health plans become subject to Obamacare? And
and the running narrative on the conservative side is that each new manifestation of the problems associated with the law is going to alienate people ever further. So, whatever steps Obama takes to delay parts of the law are going to create a situation where, the bad news, flows at a somewhat slower rate, but it's still bad news.
Well, do you think, since so many more people are going to be tied to the group health, and so that depends on whether those plans have to be changed to be able to be commensurate with the guidelines and regulations within Obamacare, that will there not be an avalanche of, and to use your word just now, alienation later on this year? And if there's alienation, won't that really result in a negative aspect to the Democrats in the polls? Actually, election, I should say.
Well, what is interesting is, I think you've gotten this administration, it's not atypical. A bunch of people think they're very, very smart and probably don't have that much respect for the voters in general, who think that if they keep spinning the story this way, that way, they can keep enough people on side that there isn't going to be some sort of massive voter revolt in November. It may well be that by shifting around the implementation of parts of this plan, they may be compounding their problems. Because as we've seen, the central flaw in the administration is they can't execute complex undertakings. That's really, Obama's an incompetent manager, and he's hired a bunch of incompetent managers. You wouldn't see this kind of catastrophic implementation normally in the private sector, but it's on display for all to see. And because they're so weak at that, you may find that by shifting around implementation schedules and the various executive edicts that he keeps announcing affecting parts of the law, he may actually make the rollout, such as it is, even worse over time. And in fact, that's pretty much what I expect, because I don't think they've learned anything from this experience. I think they're still trying to spin it as best they can.
Well, what about the coming problem with the corporations having to change their group plans? Is that within the scope of coming tide of dissatisfaction that you alluded to just now?
It's all variation on a theme. If people with a plan A are suddenly going to be presented with a different plan with change deductibles, with different costs, and we're going to see to what extent corporations throw them onto the Obamacare market, or cut back the benefits they've offered in the past. I mean, there's going to be a whole range of corporate responses to this, and it's hard to imagine that very many people are going to be happy at the end of it.
Has there been a corporate response already? It won't probably happen until the second half of 2014?
Well, there's been a corporate response to the extent that certain companies are not definitely hiring more than 50 employees, so they can avoid elements of Obamacare. There's been a response to the extent that they've cut back hours of our workers' hours in order not to exceed what arbitrarily defined as a full-time employee. So yeah, there's been a corporate response already in those areas.
Oh, that's true. I've been speaking with some doctors employed at hospitals, and they have indicated that Obamacare has had a tremendous result already, in the sense that they are not hiring. The hospitals are not hiring, and the new doctors coming out of school have no place to go and are unemployed presently. The older doctors are keeping their jobs, and that primary care physicians are changing the way that they're managing their practice. With this result, with the healthcare being really 16 to 18% of the economy, this type of sudden change is going to have possibly a negative effect on the economy in the second half of 2014, if not following that into 2015.
Well, I don't disagree. I think corporations in general are rational. I'm looking at a company right now out here called Optum Surgical that provides. They're in the early stages, but their idea, they were spun off from Swedish, which is very well respected in Seattle, Swedish Medical Center. And what their approach is to go to a corporation directly and say, okay, you've got whatever, 50,000 employees, 100,000 employees. We will handle all of their hip and knee replacement operations. So whatever, you've got X percent of employees that require that on an annual basis. We will do all that surgery at a much cheaper rate in a centralized location using robot-assisted surgery by one doctor who's highly rated, and we will save you money that way on this particular procedure. You're going to see, I think, in response to the higher costs generally associated with Obamacare, private solutions that will help corporations lower their costs for particular procedures. So, I mean, there's already a response to the law happening at an entrepreneurial level.
You know, one more question. You mentioned a little while ago the word incompetency. Were you talking about the healthcare industry when I say incompetency within the administration of President Obama? Or were you speaking in general an incompetency? I wondered if you could just elaborate on that just for a second.
I was simply referring to the lack of controls surrounding the rollout of that website. I mean, the lack of testing. Basic stuff that any corporation would have to do, or potentially be liable. But they failed. Whether it's Kathleen Sebelius, the CTO, Mr. Park, I think his name is, or Obama, the nuts and bolts implementation of the website failed at so many levels that it's shocking. You can't describe it as other than incompetence. And what is more, the fact that no one has been fired apparently on the back of this is astonishing to me.
Right, $680 million for a website that a private corporation could put up for $100,000 or something. It's mind-boggling, the inefficiency of government. Rick, I think we're out of time, and I want to thank you for again this week for joining us, and we'll see you next week. And I want to thank our viewers for joining us, and we'll see you next week also here on the Philosophical Angle.
Thank you.